Thank you, Peter, and good morning, everyone. My name is Trish Gelbart and I'm a member of the MAV Conference Committee. Today, I'll be your room host. My role is to introduce presenters and sessions and provide any announcements. If you have any technical issues, please check your confirmation email for troubleshooting and who to contact for support. So let's begin. This is room 5 and our keynote presenter for this room is Leicha Bragg. Leicha is a senior lecturer in mathematics education at the Faculty of Arts and Education at Deakin University, Melbourne. Her extensive experience incorporates improving mathematics education through innovative and engaging approaches. Dr. Bragg has been the recipient of multiple teaching awards, including the Australian Learning Teaching Council Citation Award for Teaching Excellence, for outstanding curriculum and resource development that equips our future mathematics teachers with confidence, passion, and skills they need to support student learning. Her interest in making mathematics come alive saw her undertake research in implementing mathematics games in the primary classrooms. Dr. Bragg's current research includes mathematical reasoning, the creation of rich mathematical tasks through the use of children's literature, social justice, and mathematics. Leicha has pre-recorded her keynote. However, she will be online to answer any questions during the presentation via the Q&A chat feature. So I would now like to welcome Leicha Bragg.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me in this presentation on teaching mathematics for social justice. My name's Leicha Bragg and I'm from Deakin University. I just wanted to show you the clip that I have here at first and what that is actually about, in case you're wondering. This is actually a photo taken at the Toronto waterfront, and it is the representation of each figure, represents 1 million refugees in the world. And so we have 25 figures with the inner tube there. So that was trying to give a sense of the scale and the immensity of the problems that are faced with the amount of refugees that are actually in the world. So I thought it was a nice image to get us started. We also, I would just like to acknowledge our land, and I will do the one that for where I am at the moment, which is in Canada and in Vancouver, Canada. So I would like to acknowledge that I'm gathered on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the coastal Salish people. So it's the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam nations. When we look at social justice, we look at there's many issues that we can start looking at with our students. And this is where you need to consider what it is that is important to the students in your classroom, but also thinking more broadly, what are the sort of very big issues that are facing our world at the moment. So one of them is the global forced displacements have hit a record high. So according to the UNHCR, the Global Trends Report has found that there are 79.5 million people, or 1 in every 95, that are displaced from their homes by conflict or persecution. And that was from the end of last year. So when we look at that, that means that the average person is being displaced every 2 seconds. And it's a sort of staggering amount of people. And this is one of the areas that we can start to look at as a social justice issue and making our students aware of those issues. Another big issue for students is global climate change, and for us, obviously there's scientific evidence of warming of the climate system is unequivocal. So we've had the most warming has occurred in the past 35 years, with the 6 warmest years on record taking place since 2014. So making our students aware of, the temperature rising, our surface area, and what the repercussions of that are, and what students can do around that is really quite important. Giving that sort of sense of empowerment to students is that they can actually make a change. And as we've seen that, a child in Sweden has made a huge change in raising the awareness of global problems and global warming. For people worldwide. The global average sea level is rising, And when I first put together a slide talking about this, that was in 2017, looking at the averages. The last measurement had been from then was 84.4 millimetres. And then in 2019, I looked at the stats again, it was 90 millimetres, had been since 1993. Now we're looking at our latest is 94 millimetres. So you can see that even putting together the slides actually for me was quite horrific in the fact of how much sea levels are rising. And then you can think about how that would impact the people who are around us, particularly the nations that are in the South Pacific, also how it impacts on not only people, but the animal kingdom and all the repercussions of that too for people. Look, also a really important issue to consider is the worldwide lack of access to clean drinking water. And so there is 1 in 10 people worldwide that lacks safe drinking water. Here we have people lining up in Myanmar for drinking water, but we don't have to actually go too far from home to consider the problems that arise with drinking water and safe drinking water. We look at what's happening in New South Wales with massive problems with their access to drinking water. And you think then what are the repercussions for people who don't have clean drinking water? Then how do you wash your hands in COVID times to keeping yourself safe? That's requiring you to wash your hands. I mean, these are the sort of not only is the drinking aspect, but they're also safety from a health perspective. Drinking water also affects. There's 2 billion people globally use a source of drinking water that is fecally contaminated. And that's an incredible amount of people who are therefore in a situation of not having clean drinking water. So some of the facts around that is in 2017, 71% of the global population, or 5.3 billion people, used a safely managed drinking water service. And that's one that's located on their premises and as needed, and it's free of contamination. But then when we look at that, that globally, when we've got 2 billion people drinking contaminated waters, as contaminated with fecal matter, and that carries diseases such as, diarrhea, cholera, dysentery, typhoid, polio. And those are some of the repercussions of drinking these contaminated waters. When we look at the Black Lives Movement, that was founded in 2013, and that has certainly seen a rise in people's understanding and awareness of Black lives since the George Floyd's death. And I think that's has gone beyond the US and has obviously touched Australia, UK, Canada, all around the world. People are looking at how we can eradicate white supremacy, and also making sure that we consider that Black lives matter too. And just, I think, on a personal level, I have now become much more aware of the everyday instances of racism that, I think, being a white person, I had never even realised occurred until you start hearing more and more the stories of people of colour and what they go through every day. I think one issue, obviously, that we cannot avoid at the moment is COVID-19. And the impact that that's having on all of us, and not just us worldwide. A sort of staggering figure that's come out from the United Nations is 1.6 billion students and 63 million primary and secondary teachers have been affected by COVID-19. We don't really understand the full scale and the long-term impact of the pandemic, and that's yet unknown. What is forecast is the devastating impact of the economy on COVID as a result of COVID-19. So that approximately, and this is coming from the UN Secretary General in his August report from this year, is that approximately 24 million students worldwide may never return to school or will not have access at all to school for the next year. The World Bank paints a quite a dire picture of what the potential impact is on learners. The general level of basic education will fall globally as a result of the loss in income for current students, and that's going to have an impact across their lifetime. That impact is going to be felt in the potential for higher education, the potential therefore for increased income, so that they are predicting that current students will have a fall in their income over their lifetime. So it's a pretty dramatic impact on all those students. People with low income jobs have been forced into situations where they need to work because they have to weigh up, their health and then, putting food on the table. We also know that females have predominantly been more affected than males in a situation, and this is globally again, that more often than not, females have needed to leave their jobs to look after children who are now at home, or that they've had to pull back from their jobs because they may be more often the primary carer in the home, and therefore they are the ones who are juggling, helping for their children's learning, but also for their own jobs and the responsibilities for those roles. So it's having a massive impact across for everyone. How would you define social justice? And I want you just to take a note of that, if you wouldn't mind just writing that down, and just take some time to think about, what does social justice mean to you? From an Australian perspective, human rights have defined social justice as being securing fairness for all in the everyday issues of life. Social justice is the equal distribution of resources and opportunities in which outside factors that categorise people are irrelevant. And those outside factors might be their race, their gender, their backgrounds, so their level of education. And so it's being about that equal distribution of resources and opportunities. I like this quote, really looking about the empowerment for oppressed people, which is the work of Freire. And it is not possible to act in favour of equality, respecting others, the right to a voice, participation, and reinventing the world in a regime that denies the freedom to work, eat, speak, criticise, read, disagree, come and go, and in short, the freedom to be. So when we're looking at social justice, we need to think about, who has those accesses to those freedoms to work and to speak, to be able to criticise. Are we able to criticise our government and decisions and policies made in a productive way? Are we allowed to disagree with others? Are we allowed to come and go? Do we have access to food to be able to eat? Do we have access to education to be able to read? So thinking about who has that access and who has that power, and thinking about, again, how we can empower our students through teaching of social justice, so that they can look at what is that effect and how people are oppressed in particular ways. So improving our future starts with education. Therefore, we must look to explore social justice with our students. In fact, in our curriculum, it invites us to explore ethical behaviours. So in the Victorian curriculum, it's known as ethical capability. In the Australian one, it's known as ethical understanding under the general capabilities. And it's all strongly tied to social justice. So the rationale for an ethical understanding of the curriculum explores what it means for both an individual and society to live well. Students examine what we ought to do, how we ought to live, and what kind of society we should have, and with what kind of person one should be. These questions concern individuals alone and relationships between people, and between people and the environment. the social aspects and the economic systems. Ethical capability curriculum aims to develop knowledge, understanding and skills to enable students to analyse and evaluate ethical issues, recognising areas of contestability, identify the basis of ethical principles and ethical reasoning, engage with the challenges of managing ethical decision-making and action for individuals and groups, and cultivate open-mindedness and reasonableness. So where we can start with that is we can explore the strength students' capability to make decisions informed by understanding of the values, principles, concepts and ideas that underpin different assumptions and the ability to analyse and evaluate those. So we talk about the ethical capability, but how does that fit in with the mathematics? So it's about us presenting ideas, situations to students where they need to consider the ethics, the fairness, what they view as being fair and ethical. And so, and getting them to challenge their ideas and discuss that with others, their peers and with you as a teacher. So if we look at an activity that we do have, thinking about making it local and starting off at a smaller level, and thinking about what's their idea of fairness. This activity comes from the book Rethinking Mathematics and Teaching Social Justice by Numbers, and it's a really utterly inspiring book, so I strongly suggest it. If you can get hold of it, please do. So I've adapted this task. So it's grandfather's 70th birthday. So it was grandfather's 70th birthday. His 3 children wanted to throw him a party to celebrate. The hall rental, the band, food and decorations will cost a total of $4,500. The brother, a medical specialist who makes about $20,000 per month, suggests that the 3 children split the costs equally. One of the sisters, a university professor who makes about $6,000 per month, said that would not be fair. She suggested the following. The brother pays $3,150. She would pay $900, and the younger sister, a partner in the family business and single mum of 2 boys who makes about $3,000 per month, should pay $450. Write a position statement using mathematical evidence, talking about proportions, ratio, percentages, to support your conclusion to the following questions. And this is where I'd like you to think about this too, because I'd like you to have a go at this task and see where you come up with this. Which person do you agree with and why? What is fair in this situation? And can you think of an alternative financial arrangement that might be better or more fair from your perspective? And then you ask students to come up with a mathematical rationale for that as well. So I'll get you to have a think about that. Is equal always fair? Well, the brothers option has given us 3 equal splits to paying for this party. But how would that impact as a part of the monthly income of each of them? Well, for the younger sister, $1,500 is half her monthly income of $3,000. So that's a big slice of the pie for her. Even for the professor's sister, this is a quarter of her monthly income. And for the brother, it's 7.5% of his monthly income. So you can see then why the sister has then considered that that might not be a fair option, because it doesn't take into account the monthly incomes of each of them. So with the sister option, we're looking more that they're roughly all paying about 15% of their monthly income. And so that is the option in which she is looking at as a fairer alternative. Children have come up with different ideas for the way they could do this and have justified it in the way of saying, well, the brother is making the most amount of money, So therefore, he should pay for the whole party. You may have come up with a different option. One way to also discuss this with children too is to, if they say, well, the brother is going to pay for the whole party, and then it's finished, so sort of like almost the task is over. One point to add to it is that the sisters do want to contribute to the party, so that there needs to be some justification for the amount that they will contribute, and that they do want to do that. An alternative option, unfortunately at the moment, is that this is maybe the only option, is the virtual party, so there is no money to be had. It is interesting though, with our context of what we might be looking at, is our idea of fairness and how that can actually shift depending on the situation that we're looking at. I'm just going to introduce the next task. Please note that I don't introduce this with children, but it's one for you to consider if your position on this changes. Grandfather's estate. Sadly, grandfather passed away. His life savings was $450,000. He did not leave a will, but wanted the money to be passed to his 3 children. What recommendation would you make to grandfather's 3 children to divide the estate? And again, it's to write a position statement on that. How should his 3 children divide the 450,000? And you can see I've used the same figures, but larger. What is fair in this situation? And is your solution different or the same to how each person contributes to grandfather's party, and why? So I just want to give you some time to think about that one too. Maybe you've changed your position on the way in which you see grandfather's estate should be divided or shared amongst the 3 children. Interestingly, the most common response has been that originally that the Professor Sister's idea was the way to go when it was talking about contributing to the party. But now, when it was an estate, many people switch and say, no, it should be divided 3 ways equally. So they don't see it as being now that they're all on a percentage of what they actually earn, or the ratio of what they earn. It should actually be a 3-way split. So that's sort of interesting in that the situation, because of it being an estate, the idea of fairness has changed. Could be about the amount of money too. And so it's just interesting to then reflect on why did your position change when you have the different scenarios. Again, I haven't given this task to children about the estate, just being sensitive to, parents and grandparents passing away, but it's just it's more a task to show you how your ideas may change given the situation. Okay, so let's reflect about the task. What does this task offer as a way to engage students in mathematics and social justice in a local setting? So it's a task that was designed to be personalised to the students. How might we create a similar task with a different context to teach mathematics through social justice? And so that's where I want you to start thinking about the different ideas that are present now and the different areas to explore is what might be the tasks that you can pull out of these. And I will show you some tasks that I've also been doing both in Canada and in Australia. And if you come up with any of these great tasks with different contexts, I would love to hear about them too. So let's look at the role of mathematics in teaching social justice. You have to be aware of the social justice issues, and you have to care about those social justice issues to want to be engaged in them. And the mathematics is going to help students to be aware of those social justice issues. So mathematics is the essential tool for understanding our changing world. To have more than a surface understanding of important social and political issues, mathematics is essential. Without mathematics, it's impossible to fully understand a governmental budget, the meaning of national debt, the impact on war on our society, and other social, ecological, and cultural issues. Mathematics then will help us to understand these issues, and it helps children to see them in ways that were impossible without mathematics. For example, by visually displaying data in graphs that otherwise might have been incomprehensible or seemingly meaningless. So let's have a look then of social justice in context. I often go to the UNHCR site, and they'll have figures at a glance of what's going on in the world at the moment. And they're an excellent source of information, and it's regularly updated. So here, if we're looking again about the refugees and forcibly displaced people worldwide. So 79.5 million, as I had said earlier, are forcibly displaced. So what does that actually mean when we start to break that down? So here we've got 26 million people are refugees. That's including Palestinians. If we look at the internal displaced people, that's 45.5 million people are internally displaced. We've got 4.2 million asylum seekers, and 3.6 Venezuelans have been displaced abroad. So basically, we've got looking at 1% of the population is displaced. So these are sort of massive numbers for us to think about. We've also got to think about what our role as Australians are in assisting people who have been displaced, refugees and asylum seekers. So where are the refugees going and where are they coming from? We can see 73% are hosted by their neighbouring countries. Turkey is taking in a massive amount of people. 3.6 million people are being hosted in Turkey. And think about what that does to the Turkish economy, their situation, when they're taking in so many people at one time too. So it's massive changes that are going on. We see Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, Germany, all taking in large amount of people that are going in. Interestingly, Germany is not a neighbouring country to refugees, but is one of the major countries that is taking in refugees. Mainly where refugees come from, so 6.6 million Syrians have been displaced. As we said before, the Venezuelans, there's Afghanis, South Sudanese and Myanmar. Our latest statistics for Australia for taking refugees is 6,000 a year for refugees. And then there's another figure for taking people who already have been seeking asylum and have been given refugee status and allowing their families in, and it comes to 13,500 people all told that Australia takes in. So quite a considerably low amount compared to other countries. Another area you may wish to explore might be water. And this will give us, and this has an immediate impact on particularly people in New South Wales, but it can be an issue that can be explored that shows a local context for Australia and the global context of it as well. So I'm just going to run you through some true or false questions. So true or false? Fresh water makes up 20% of all water found on Earth. So is that true or is it false? Okay, that's actually false. There's actually a little over 2% of the water is fresh water found on Earth. The rest is salt water. And interestingly, about half of it is found in Canada. And if anyone's been to Vancouver, you'd know why, because there is a lot of rain. Okay, going to the next question then. Water scarcity affects almost 3 billion people each year. Is that true or false? Now we're talking about water scarcity. weren't talking about the fecal water, things like that. And that is true. There's around 2.7 billion people who have experienced a period of at least 1 month of water scarcity each year. Let's have a look at another one. And bottled water is safer and better regulated than tap water. True or false? So that's false. The laws that regulate bottled water are less strict than those that regulate tap water. So I've got another quiz for you now. So we're just having a think about, okay, what are the facts around water? Here's another quiz for you to consider. Is the water footprint? So I'd like you to place these items in the order of their water footprint. Basically, how much water does it take for these to be made? So there's 3 water footprints before we go on. So there's a green water footprint that's, that comes from precipitation that's stored in the root zone of the soil and evaporated and transpires by the plants. There's blue water that is sourced from the surface and groundwater resources and evaporates and is incorporated into the product and taken from one body of water and returned to another. And then there's the grey water. So the amount of fresh water required to assimilate pollutants to meet specific water standard qualities. It was sort of water quality standards, sorry. And so, for about the pollution that's discharged into the fresh water. So I'd like you to think about, so there's those 3 aspects of the water footprint. So there's green, blue and grey water. I'm going to combine those. And once you think about what has the least footprint to the largest footprint. So what uses the most water? So here we've got our coffee, cheese, apple, bread and chocolate. And just to clarify, for the coffee, it's about making a cup of coffee. The others are about 1 kilo of the, for each of those, what it would take to produce. So I'll just give you a little bit of time just to think those through. Put them in order from the lowest use of water to the highest use of water. Okay, so it's sort of a little bit shocking at how much chocolate, the water footprint that chocolate uses. And it's not to make you feel guilty about chocolate at all, but it's just to raise our awareness of the water footprint that is impacted when we eat 1 kilo of chocolate. So maybe just a little tiny block at a time. And so, yes, I'm not sure if you're surprised by these results. I'm shocked, dismayed. But yes, you can see that there's a huge difference in the water footprint here. So just something, again, that we can get our students to consider. This site that is waterfootprint.org has a whole gallery of different items that come out that you can see the water footprint from. So it's a really interesting one to explore. Again, understanding the water dynamics, we need the mathematics to understand, the impact on the products that we use. The t-shirt water footprint is actually quite an alarming statistic too that we can look at. That in order for us to make a cotton t-shirt, it takes 2,700 litres to produce a single t-shirt. And that's enough for one person to drink for 900 days. And I know that in the past, I have been a very big consumer of t-shirts. And even just looking at this one aspect of it has made me really reconsider about the use of t-shirts and do I need to buy another t-shirt, and then buying ones that are highly sort of disposable type t-shirts too that seem to almost disintegrate in your hands. But think about the amount of water that actually goes into that. So again, this is sort of like food for thought about our uses. Also, another way you could explore clothing is where it's manufactured as well. So asking children to select a piece of clothing from home, maybe a t-shirt even, and having a look at what country that is produced in, bringing that back to the classroom, and then sharing with the student, sharing their where on a map that many of these t-shirts are being made and manufactured. Also considering the cost of labour of making those t-shirts, and comparing that to how much labour and cost would be in our own country. So there's many things you can look at to do with clothing. Again, food for thought. Speaking of food, let's have a look at food waste is another area that we might want to explore. It's often very difficult, I think, to get the scale of how much food is wasted, because it really is just so enormous. In doing this, we look at food waste costs the Australian economy an estimated $20 billion each year. And then Australian consumers throw away about 3.1 million tonnes of food. So that's close to 17,000 747 jumbo jets. And you could actually think about what are the different ways that you could represent that 3.1 million tonnes. Think about the scale of what that might look like for the Australian people. So I was trying to do it through a plane, but if you don't have the reference of a plane, then you might like to consider how you could reference that amount of thrown away food. And I know myself, have been guilty of this. Not so much now because because I'm much more aware, but also I think just do with particularly with COVID is you're much more conscious of what you're taking in and bringing to your home and everything that you need for meals and things. So I know that that's actually made a considerable shift in my understanding of it too. So one way to represent it though too is the average family wastes about $1,000 of food. And so what does that mean? So that's like that we go to the shops and we have 5 shopping bags and that one of those ends up in the bin. A really great site for exploring these ideas and showing about how to fight food waste is ozharvest.org, and that will gives really fabulous information and infographics about food waste and what we can do to combat that. An area that that we're seeing more and more has been the idea of making food that is the odd bunch much more acceptable for eating, so that not all our food needs to look perfect. So this, this is from Intermarché in France, that they started making these beautiful images of fruit. We know that with Woolworths, they have the odd bunch, if you're not aware of that. And so that's, again, looking at reducing waste and, accepting that, not all food looks beautiful, but like you can cut it up and it still tastes all the same. I think Coles also does a similar program. So, just looking out for those so that we're not wasting food. Again, these are sort of areas that you can explore, local contexts that each child would be able to explore that idea of, food and food waste. How this project came about that we've been looking at social justice was with colleagues that have around the world, but have come together in Canada. And so we've got people in our group that are from Canada, United States, a couple of people from Ghana, China, New Zealand, and myself from Australia. So what we were trying to do, so we're all interested in maths, so we're either mathematics teachers, or teacher educators or teachers. And so we started looking at how we can infuse social justice into our lessons and what were sort of issues that were issues in our own country, but that might be able to be explored across different areas as well. Was there a synergy within those? So we have lots of meetings about this and discussing the different ideas and sharing the problems that have arisen in our own country, and to see if these would be able to be explored in each other's countries too. So for instance, there was, in China, there's the air quality was an issue that was raised by Tian. And this is actually children taking a test outside, and that was taken in December 2016. So these were, despite the heavy smog, 400 students were forced to take a test outdoors, which is sort of incredible. You can't even see to the end of where they are seated because of the smog. In Ghana, talked about representation or lack of representation in the political, governmental elections. There was the pipelines that are coming through Indigenous lands here in Canada, that those other ideas that were explored. So there's a multitude of different ideas that we've started to explore, but one of the areas that we particularly looked at more recently, if I go to that, is an area that I've been exploring as a unit, was on place and displacement. So this was focusing on the displacement of First Nations people and of residential schools. So children who've been removed from their families, so First Nation children who've been removed from their families and community and then put in residential schools, which we have similar that occurred in Australia as well. So we're looking at, the students' place of being in Canada and how people were displaced, but also looking at that displacement more globally as well. But again, it was the idea of looking inward to what was happening for the students, or what had happened, the students in their local area, to be able to give them the sense of what was going on beyond those walls as well. So what was interesting about this topic and exploring this, and I worked with people in Vancouver and Cynthia Nicol at University of British Columbia in Vancouver as well. And it was quite amazing to see how the students really became enlightened through exploring the mathematics of these issues. And they really want to make a difference in their world around that as well. So we had various tasks that we did, and I'm going to just share one of them with you. So we, first of all, we wanted to look at it was talked about a stolen land lesson. So it's talking about the stolen land of where the land, through colonisation, that land was stolen from the Indigenous people, so First Nations people. So we looked at Canada has an area, and we looked at that area, and we asked the children to represent it using the MAV minis to represent those. And then once we got them to look at that, then we started to look at the land that was then stolen. So first of all, if you can see, here are the students making up basically the size of Canada as a representation of each block is 10,000 square kilometres. And it was actually fascinating to watch how engaged they were with doing that. Then we asked them to, in this picture, you actually can see that's the area of Canada, and we actually asked them to remove to the side British Columbia, which is the province that we are in. I asked them to move that to the side, so they got the idea of how big Canada is as the whole, and then the area of British Columbia as the province. Next part we got was to ask the children to look at the total area of Canadian reserve land that is now left for First Nations people. And hopefully you can see that is, there's a sort of tiny little bit of white square that's on the larger part of Canada there, rectangle. And that was to represent how much reserve land is left. So it's 26,000 kilometres squared. And then we asked them to look at how much land was just in BC alone out of that actual amount. and that's represented with the little tiny rectangle, which is on the BC, the area for BC, which is represented there. So in doing this, it was really incredible to see how the children responded when they had a much clearer picture of what the size of what was Canada and what was left in reserve land. And so some of the comments, some of these comments that children made was, you know, it's not fair, which is, you know, is where we really wanted them to get to, is starting to think about why isn't it fair? What is fair? They were really curious if this was happening in other countries, and were questioned me about what happened in Australia, and which got me thinking, well, you know, what are the numbers that we have in Australia as well? And exploring that too. So making those connections with other countries. One, I thought, poignant response was from a student who said it was like someone coming into your house, took all your possessions, but let you keep one pot and told you to stand in the corner. And that's how they saw, you know, this, you know, what has happened to the First Nation people from there, you know, in Canada. And so we're really indignant and shocked, and, you know, really wanted to make sense of why this was happening. So it was a really interesting way, a very graphic, you know, showing this representation, a very clear way that we got the message across of what the differences were and the change over time. Interestingly, we also had maps that showed that sort of transition over time of the land, the reserve land, shrinking further and further down. So that's just one sort of area that you could look at, and you can see how that might translate quite easily into an Australian context as well, through looking at impact on, you know, stolen generation and stolen land as well. A fascinating site that you might want to explore is one called Gapminder. If you're not aware of it, it is quite amazing, particularly with the mathematics that is behind this. So what they've got is a whole lot of data about different countries in the world. They go through to, they've had people go into homes throughout the world, and they've asked them and taken photographs of different aspects of what they have, you know, cooking utensils, the toilet, the toothbrush, the people who they are, where's their lounge room, you know, what's their favorite toy. They have photos of their teeth, you know, like it's quite incredible. And then they have a look at what their income is across all these different countries, the family income too. So I'll have a look at that. So what they call that is Dollar Street, where it has all these images. And as you look at Dollar Street, it says, it calls it, would you imagine the world as a street? All houses are lined up by income, poor living to the left and the rich to the right. Everywhere else, somewhere, and everybody is somewhere in between. And then they ask, you know, where do you live? So you can see that across the board here, they will have different monthly incomes. And then you can click on any one of those and to have and explore those families and, you know, how they're living. So again, they show you things like washing hands on different incomes. So there's some people, and as I talked before about, you know, the impact of COVID, some people don't have running water or access to running water. So in order to help wash their hands, they have to go and, you know, take a bowl, go and fetch water, and then bring that back to be able to wash their hands. So you can think about every time that we've now been washing our hands, what the impact is for those people who then have to walk, you know, however far they do, to actually be able to wash their hands. And so you can see the impact that has on them as far as staying safe and healthy. Then it shows that some people have one running tap that might be in the community or just outside their house that they could go to, or having the luxury of having a running tap in your own home. So they show that sort of comparison across the neighbourhoods. It also shows you, for instance, you can look at the cooking on different incomes. And here we've got, you know, people who are cooking with using a hole in the ground and twigs and bricks. There's moving through to people having just the one pot on then going through to a hot plate, and those that it's more common in Australia, which would be having different stove tops so that you can cook different elements. So again, you know, they're showing these sort of differences, and that students may not be aware of what is happening in other countries or other parts of their own country to be able to see this. And that's what opens up the eyes of Dollar Street to, opens up the eyes of students to what happens through, you know, looking at Dollar Street. Here's an activity that we looked at, which was toothbrushes on different incomes. So you can see again, here is the range. So it starts from having a stick for a toothbrush, and sometimes they'll show someone using fingers as being their toothbrush, to a family having one toothbrush, to families moving through to having a toothbrush each. And then what was seen in some of the more wealthy families was having their own electric toothbrush. So interestingly though, it's funny how our assumptions of what, from our own perspectives, come into play when discussing this, that how terrible it would be to have a stick for a toothbrush, and that, you know, that must be really, you know, so quite challenging. And yet when we were talking to the, in our group, with the two people from Ghana, they laughed because it's really quite common for people to have a toothbrush as their stick, as the stick as the toothbrush, and that they chew it up to make the brush and then brush their teeth. And that's quite a common across the board, from, you know, from people who have in the poorest incomes to middle class, to people who are quite wealthy and can afford to then come to schools in different countries. So yeah, we also have to think of some of our assumptions that come around about that as well. So, though, that being said, there are many families that cannot afford a toothbrush and may wish to have a toothbrush. One of the activities we did with a grade 1 class was actually getting them to create their own bar graphs and looking at how they would represent the data in different ways. They could look at maybe plastic toothbrushes to no toothbrush, or non-toothbrushes, non-plastic, sorry. Some were looking at, you know, the amount of toothbrushes, you know, having more than one toothbrush versus having one for the family, man-made versus plant-made toothbrushes. So there's different ways in which the children, you know, represented the data and explored the different ideas that were coming out to them when they were looking at these different images. One thing that Gapminder also does is it has a project ignorance. Strange name, but it's actually quite interesting that they have this project ignorance, and it's trying to overcome the ignorance that many people have about facts and figures around different issues. And so if you do get a chance, I really strongly suggest that you go and have a look at their quiz. It's a 13 quiz questionnaire. And it's really quite fascinating to have a look at, and just to have a look at what your assumptions are about the figures that come through, and that strangely we often are a little bit catastrophic in some of the numbers that come through, and they talk about why that might be. So here's just one question, and this they have on a Facebook page as well. So they sort of showed these images too. They often will have a quiz that will come through on that. So biologists have evaluated the status of more than 100,000 plants and animals. How many are endangered or threatened? So I'd like you to consider that. Is it 30%, 60%, or 90%? Okay. So having a look at this, interestingly, and the way they phrase it's quite interesting. So it's correct that 30% have been endangered. So maybe you had 30%. Here they've got, if you've got 60%, you're wrong, and if you've got 90%, you're very wrong. So there was actually a huge difference in how people answered this question. So they had this questionnaire with the UK. So only 18% of people in the UK answered correctly. More commonly, people answered 60%, which was 57, answered the 60%, and that was 59% of people did that. But at least a quarter thought that 90% of plants and animals were endangered or threatened. Interestingly, though, they did say that the Gapminder followers who are aware that potentially they were saying more aware of what are some of the problems in the world, had the largest correct answer percentage with correct answers. So I really do, though, encourage you to go through and have a look. And even just looking at one of the questions there and raising that with your students as an investigation would be really well worth exploring. Another terrific site that you might want to have a look at that's full of facts and figures for us is ifitweremyhome.com. So it compares, you compare two countries. So if the United States were your home instead of Australia, you would, and then it goes through the statistics of what would likely happen. 4.8 times more likely to be in prison. You would have 6.32% less free time. So you can even explore what that might look like. You would spend, which is really shocking, 45% more money on healthcare if you lived in the United States than in Australia. So there's a lot to be thankful for where we do live. So it's just really interesting how you can explore different ideas for that. So maybe another site to investigate. So what are local contexts that we can explore? So you need to be mindful when you're exploring social justice issues that they do come from students' interests as well. So considering that, but also considering what you are aware of are some of the bigger social justice issues that are in Australia. So again, making students aware of those ideas issues through their awareness and through the numbers to help them care about them. So the Australian social justice context might be, or ones to consider, are justice and reconciliation for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, refugees and asylum seekers, and as many people may be aware that we've got refugees living in Australia or offshore from Australia now 7 years have been in detention. So thinking about those issues that arise from that. Environmental sustainability, domestic violence, or violence against women and children generally, not outside the home as well. Confronting racism, economic justice, there's bullying and cyberbullying and e-safety, political engagement, and then of course we have COVID-19 and the impact that is going to cause and highlights inequities in our society as well. When we started out as a group, we actually felt a lot of discomfort around exploring maths as social justice because of our lack of knowledge. We felt really strong as maths educators and maths teacher educators in understanding mathematics and how to teach that. But when we infused the social justice into that, we felt that we didn't sort of understand the social justice issues enough to be able to do that. And so that was something we had to reconcile. So a couple of comments that were made was, I feel like I'm a new teacher again, reliving all the emotion that goes with that uncertainty. And you know what it's like to be a pre-service teacher and or a beginning teacher and you're sort of unsure of yourself. And here we felt that again, like, well, where do we go with this? One of the teachers also in our group said, I feel I don't know enough about social justice to lead my students in a meaningful direction in the same way I can do with maths. So one idea to look at that is to find the numbers. So you don't have to be an expert on a particular issue, but if you find the numbers within that issue, then that will help with, the students driving the discussion, driving the thinking around those issues. Of course, you don't want to come into something just cold with no knowledge of it. It requires a bit of background reading, but finding those numbers and teaching social justice through the mathematics, that can show children how they can make a difference. And highlighting the numbers will help to make students aware of the inequities that do arise and are in our society. Here is the book I was talking about earlier, which is that Rethinking Mathematics. And there's some really nice quotes that come from that I'd like to share. Teach math in a way that helps students more clearly understand their lives in relation to their surroundings, and to see math as a tool to help make the world more equal and just. Social justice issues motivate children to learn mathematics. And I know from my own experience, I have never seen children so motivated and so engaged in mathematics as I have when I've been looking at them, when we've been looking at mathematics through a social justice lens. And, I love playing games. I mean, my PhD was on games, and yet I still have not seen children as engaged in mathematics as when they have been looking at social justice issues. So that has been really enlightening for me. And also deepen students' understanding of society and to prepare them to be critical, active participants in a democracy. And so those are really key reasons why we would want to teach mathematics for social justice. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope this has given some insights, opportunities, context for how you might also meet this challenge about how to explore teaching, explore social justice through teaching mathematics. Thank you.
Thank you, Leicha. That was so interesting. Thank you, Leicha. That was so interesting. I can't get it off. Thank you, Leicha. That was so interesting. I apologise for that technical glitch if you could hear that presentation. But you've shown us fabulous examples of bringing maths to life and how it affects and reflects our daily lives, and how we can engage our students in mathematics using practical, social and political cues. On behalf of the MAV, I'd like to thank you for your keynote today. We have so appreciated your ideas, experience and contribution. And just sorry if we just had to cut off a little bit at the end, but we are on a tight schedule today. Also, I'd like to thank the Department of Education and Training for sponsoring our keynote today. We'll now take a quick break. Don't forget to check out the virtual delegate satchel and to touch base with our sponsors and exhibitors. The next session will commence at 10:25.